talk to him as you're in the planning phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just
I will definitely.
the guy. Yeah.
I will definitely do that.
Black and gold was cool in the Stillman days, back in the Stillman days, but
I always said that we should have went back to those colors.
I do too, but it was those Illyria
I'm so
people.
glad we.
It was those Illyria pioneers that wanted us.
That would have made my wardrobe so incredibly easy.
We weren't gonna say what we were gonna do.
But I was
We were gonna
okay
say
with the
what we
black
were
and
not
gold.
going to do.
I just don't like your black and gold. All right, we are ready to start. Call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ballard,
Here.
Ms. Nazario,
Here.
Ms. Johnson, Mr. Sturgill,
Here.
and Mr. Williams.
Here.
Pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first recognition of visitors. Seeing none, is there a hearing of the public? There's none. I need a motion to approve two sets of minutes, one from September the 28th and the other from October the 5th. So moved.
Support.
Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ballard,
Yes.
and Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Being approved. Next line is old business. Do we have anything under old business to discuss? Anyone? Hearing none. Report and recommendations of the treasurer.
I just have the delegate and alternate that needs to be officially approved for the OSBA annual business meeting.
So this is the annual delegate approval that we get every year. Of course, the president is the delegate, and then the vice is usually the alternate. That would be me and Bill. Need a motion, please?
Motion to approve as read.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Yep.
Ms. Nazario,
Yes.
Mr. Ballard,
Yes.
and Mr. Sturgill.
Yes. It has passed. Report and recommend, is there anything else you have, Tia?
No, that's it.
Good for you. Thank you. Recommendations of the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we get started, I think Chris is going to push a button for me. Is that right? From Donis, you have that video? Oh, you got it? Ross has it? We're going to try and get back in the swing. Give me 1 second here while I kind of set this up. Get back into our tradition of recognizing, honoring our students and staff. Good things happen in the buildings, and just because we're not there to see it on a daily basis doesn't mean it's not happening. So tonight we're going to have Stephen Hannes representing Hispanic Month under the leadership of Principal Marie Deschek. And we will start with a short video of Dr. Raquel Ortiz introducing her book to fourth grade staff and students. Dr. Ortiz has also autographed and donated 6 books to Hannes to raffle off to our students.
Hi, I'm Raquel. I'm a Center for Puerto Rican Studies and Culture and Basketball Program. I'm an author and today I'm going to share a special book, Sophie and the Magic Musical Mural. And this book is extra special for me because I'm the author of the book. The illustrator of the book is Maria Dominguez, and the book is published by Art and Ortega Press. And while I'm reading the story, please join me by singing along. The first I'm going to
You don't have to if you don't want to.
everyone is making Lena. Perfect.
Lena.
So the first instrument I'm going to share is the maraca. Everyone, maraca. Perfect. Maraca. Claves. Everyone, claves. So the claves. So this next instrument is called a guiro. Let's try that together. Guiro. This is how you play it. So our last instrument is the pandereta. So everyone, pandereta. And while some people think it's like a tambourine, it looks like a tambourine, it's actually a percussion, it's a drum. So there's 2 beats for the pandereta. The first plena pandereta beat is Okay, so everyone is track. Tap, 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 tap. So now that we can choose all of the instruments, we're gonna go over the songs. So it's 3 songs. The first one I'm gonna teach you is a simple song from Ghana. Do, 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 do. I'd like to share with you a little bit about one of the figures we find on the cover. So this is a bank.
Very nice.
Now, if you noticed, you good? Nope.
Just disconnect the audio.
There we go. If you notice, there's a whole lot of squares on that screen, and each one of those squares represented one of our children, and they were engaged. I mean, when you watch remote learning, again, we're getting good at doing it. And what we said from the very beginning, this is not something we're going to survive. It's a situation in which we're going to thrive. And as we transition into phase 2 and phase 3, remote learning isn't going away. I mean, it's a tool that is excellent in many situations. Obviously, a pandemic is one. But as we get back to normal times, this is something we will continue to exercise. So just want to say thank you to Marie for her leadership and kind of showing what's going on at Tahanas. In the spirit of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I just want to we're going to give some updates on exactly where we are process-wise. And I know that people want answers in terms of what does it look like and when we're coming back. And candidly, I'm optimistic that we can have most of those questions, if not all of them, answered at our meeting we have Thursday. I'll let Ross and Michael talk a little bit about what's happened since our last meeting, and we have to still convene, and again, there's honor and process. But I do want to touch base on a couple of pieces, and they'll respond out to that. One is, I think my job is to kind of highlight our warts, because we own our situation, and there's some things we're doing very, very, very well. There's some areas where we need to improve, candidly. And one of those areas that needs improvement on our part is the technology piece. And not that anybody on site has done anything poorly. We had a good plan, but anytime you pass out 6,000 devices, some of them aren't going to work very well. And we've done that, and we've reacted and responded very, very well. But as you can see, when you're in remote learning, you're online, and that's your only connection to the schools, and it's not working. It's frustrating for the families. It's frustrating for the staff, because again, that is our one connection, our personal connection to our children. So we're working through those issues. In addition, candidly, we had an assumption based on promises made by Spectrum that changed after we signed the contract. So things were delayed there somewhat because of some folks in central office, Rachel, Tia, Brett, and jumped on things, and we have hotspots for all those families that we hand delivered that day when they came out. So people should have and continue to have their internet access, but we're also a very transient community, so people are moving in and out constantly. So as we get information, we'll make sure we react as quickly as we can. So we should be in pretty good shape, but we also understand that devices break, and we're going to have to, and internet hotspots go down. So as we work to get better at those things, I think you'll see it in the results of the survey pieces that we hear. But when we're talking to our families, and we're talking to our staff, one of the biggest frustrations is that piece of it, because again, when it's severed for whatever reason, there's a lot of downside. So downside, not downtime, but The other piece is, and we had a little release go out last week, and we've talked about it a little bit publicly, is, when we're talking about going into phase 2, and we had conversations when people are asking questions about why we're not playing sports in the fall and what makes us think we can in the winter and what's going to be different, what's going to change. And the pandemic is still here. And as we all know, the trend data is going in the wrong direction as expected. But the one thing that we hear people say at the podium, we hear people saying, I'm in a lot of meetings with a lot of superintendents, and what I hear consistently is, we only have one case, or we've had no cases. And when the reality is, we have no idea how many cases we have because we don't test. So what we are doing, and we're in the final stages of putting this together, is through partnerships with a local university that will still remain unnamed at this point, but they're providing us expertise and potentially a lot of other supports and resources. We should know more tomorrow, actually. But the expertise is there regardless. And these are medical doctors, public health, also work with public health, and they understand the whole pandemic side of what our reality is. They're gonna help us design our get back to school plan, open with care. They're gonna help us design the plan to make sure things are safe as they can be when we return. But they're also gonna help us react to the testing piece. We are going to test approximately 350 to 370 of our students weekly. And one of the questions I get, is it mandatory? And based on the information we have at this point, we don't think it needs to be. And what I mean by that is we only need to do 370, and talking to the medical experts and the research experts, if we want to have a good understanding with 95% confidence level, 5% error of what's happening throughout our school district, we need to test 350 to 370, but it doesn't have to be perfectly random. So some students can opt out because we believe we have enough students who will opt in. And the concern that I heard about people opting out is the fact that the test is so invasive because people saw what was on the news and how scary that was. The tests have come a long way since the first few months of COVID. And now literally stick it an inch up. My stepson's had it done. And my wife had it done a couple of days ago. Goes up your nose an inch. They twirl it around 3 times. They throw it in a baggie, they mail it off. So it's not invasive at all. It tickles a little bit from what I understand. But from that, we'll have an understanding of what's going on. It'll allow us to test our mitigation strategies. For example, if I get it and everybody else gets it, because we're testing, you find out I have it, even though I'm asymptomatic, but you test the people that I've been around and everybody else has it, then our mitigation strategies aren't very effective. If I get it and no one else does, then obviously we're doing the right things here in school. The other piece it allows us to do is react very quickly when someone does have it. So instead of waiting the 10 days or 20 days, or they trace it back to our classroom, we'll know within a couple of days whether or not it's an issue. And we'll also have that trend data to help us make decisions down the road. It will be required for students who choose to participate in what we're calling close proximity activities, whether those are sports or the high school play or band. Anytime we're encouraging students to behave in a way that's inconsistent with what the CDC recommends, we're going to test every one of them weekly. And the tests are about $85 a piece. And if everybody does the math, it's a lot of money a week. But we do have a local partner who demands a stay quiet that has given us a considerable amount of money and will be put towards this. So as of right now, the district is not going to spend any taxpayer dollars on this, although arguably it would be a wise use of district funds to make sure our children and families are safe. But we are working with Mercy Hospital to get the test started. And the only thing we're waiting for is for us to be completely uploaded into their system. So that should happen by no later than Wednesday, which means we can start testing our athletes and our close proximity activity students later on this week.
So the 300 and some that we need to test weekly, is that students only, or is that everybody that works within our district?
Great question. We could talk about that because there's still some debate on exactly what that looks like. What we're thinking as of now, but we have a meeting tomorrow morning with the health department and the folks who are university partners and Mercy Health to make these final decisions. And the 350 is just students. And that's 350 to 370, depending on how many students come back. But our adults, I think the number, what was the number for if we do all of our adults?
It'd be between 45 and 50 adults a week.
Weekly?
A week.
Yeah.
But again, we would do them randomly and people would opt out. And originally the question was asked, would adults be required? And my answer was yes. I'm not sure we're still there. And for me, it was no different than to work in a school district, you have to have a TB test. And if you don't have TB, then you can come in. So I think there are some standards that we set aside to make sure that our adults are safe when they mix with our children. Again, I want to get this verified tomorrow, but if I understood the medical professionals, the public health professionals, and the people that are experts in the research side of this, if I understood them correctly, I don't think we'll need to require it of all of our adults, as long as we have a statistically appropriate sample of everybody that's ongoing. So, and again, as of right now, for the population testing, it'll be an opt-out. So unless your family says, I don't want you to be a part of this for whatever reason, then you'll be a part of it. But obviously we have to have permission slip signed for that. Adults will be the same way. And we're also looking to test anyone who believes they have the symptoms to make sure we have that turnaround time a little quicker than if they were to go to their own doctors.
And I asked that question because I know as people hear us, they jump to conclusions very fast.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure they know that you're thinking out loud as we're walking through this
Yes.
process.
Thank you.
So yeah, it doesn't mean to call your union, we got to take it, why won't they let us have it, or anything like that. We're trying to figure that all out, and we're bringing everybody along as we go.
And I appreciate you pointing that out. And we have groups of people. Now, the one tomorrow will be about a dozen of us. The groups we're talking about this for phase 1, phase 2, and all the steps that need to take place. There's 35 or 40 of us. But there's a balance, and I lean very, very heavily on making sure we're thinking out loud together, sharing exactly what I know today, even though it may not be where we land. I think the alternative is was what people were concerned about, is that, we keep it a secret and all of a sudden have some big unveiling at a board meeting. And our goal is, and I think it's important that whether you're the board or staff or in the community or a student, anybody who's a part of this, we're sharing our thoughts to get your input. So if there's something that you want to share can help guide us, please do. Because again, I can offer a few perspectives, but I can't offer them all. I don't know what it's like to be a teacher right now. I don't know what it's like to be a support staff member or a nurse. I know it's like to be a husband, a father, a superintendent, an administrator, and a few pieces. But again, our goal is to solicit as much information as we can through as many different means as we can. So whether it's in those meetings of 35 and 40, and when we break that huddle, they go back out and talk to their folks, and then if they listen, then they come back and share what they learned. It's also through surveys, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So again, our goal is to keep listening to what you expect, what you need to know, and then the experts on how to do it in a way that's safe. Well, as safe as we can be.
And can you give a little more clarification? I know we've talked about the scenario where teacher or staff member, again, this isn't just teachers, this is anybody who's employed in
Yep.
the district. They wake up, they're coughing, sore throat or something, how they're able to then come, not into the building, but come to the district and get that test. And can you just expound on how that process potentially could work?
And again, that process has not been completely detailed
Right.
yet, but Mercy Health is helping us not only with making sure that we do testing in the way we've described, but also making sure, because again, we have a Mercy clinic in our schools. So also making sure that we're doing those types of things, reacting to situations in a way that's appropriate and safe. As I understand it, again, to this point, is if you believe that you have it, you drive up, we walk out, do the test, you drive away, and then we call you with the results. So again, the whole idea is to make sure we're protecting people, but also being proactive and making sure we're addressing what our reality is.
Is it also still, I think there was some thought that the testing that's being done has multiple panels. So
Oh, great point. Yes. And I got to take this off. I know I'm hard to understand sometimes because I talk fast with my mask off. So let me just respond. But Tim's question was the test that they're doing, Mercy Health, and we also have another partner. But the test that they're doing is not just a COVID thumbs up, thumbs down type of test. It's a test that will test for a variety, a very extensive list of respiratory illnesses. So if you go in, you think you've got, or you're concerned you have COVID, they'll say, no, you have the flu, or no, you have this, or no, you have that. So it might be, it'll still be something prescriptive after the fact. It's not just a yes, no, because if you don't feel well, you still don't feel well. And, it'll help us identify what your needs are.
thank you.
And so there are, I think, 19 different pathogens that the lab will test for. And then one of the huge benefits then is that if it's not COVID, depending on whatever the virus is that's causing the symptoms, you don't have to quarantine then for 14 days. So if it's a 3-day and it needs to run its course, then you're back at work or back in school 3 days later. so we can avoid having, hopefully, much missed instructional time.
And that's both for the student and the
Yeah.
adult
And the
and the
adult,
teacher.
and the adult. And we know, again, like we mentioned earlier, we're getting good at remote learning, but it's still not the same as being in person when our students are with our adults, because there's so much more to the relationship, that learning is benefited, by the relationship between the adult and the student. So we need to do our best to make sure that we are here when it's safe to be here.
Will there also be an antigen test in that by any chance? I mean,
There's a piece that the university wants to do in terms of the research, and we're not there yet. They're looking, what they would like to do is gather that through a blood sample. So we're not there yet in terms of what that would look like and who we'd be asking to volunteer to do that.
yeah, okay. I just figure at some point they're going to know how much of the population is really affected.
And that's the serology piece, but the antigen test that they do now, and I'm not, I hope I don't sound like an expert because I'm not, but as I understand, the antigen tests that we're doing now have a lot of false negatives and a lot of false positives. So we need to do the test that is done, that is, if you do it for the individual, as I understand it, it's not very effective, but if you do it for a population, you can assume some things.
Yeah.
So and then the group that's going to be in the random sampling pool, those are only students who are opting to do the phase 2. So those aren't the virtual folks, because I think when everyone decides what they're going to do, some folks are going to come back.
Mhm.
And I think having this testing opportunity might encourage some folks who weren't going to come back to now come back. They might be feel better about that. But then those individuals who opt to stay in the virtual learning world, they will not be part of this
That's
cohort
correct.
of tests.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So to make sure folks can hear that clearly.
Mhm.
So this is about students whose families choose to have them learning in place.
That's correct. But even within that group of this group of students whose families choose for them to be in person, they can still opt out of testing. They still don't have to do the test.
Now, again, this is a strange question too. So we still support all of our families who are in virtual learning fully. So will they be able to, if they wish to, like, let's say one of our families, someone's not feeling well, feeling sick, they will still be able to come in and be part of get their COVID test that way? Or
We don't
We haven't
have all
gotten
of
there
those details worked out yet
Okay.
because some of that is dependent on our partners. So those are some of the questions
Right.
we hope to get answered.
and then because that could inflate that number to a point where it might not be as cost efficient as we anticipate.
Exactly.
Right,
And
I
again, the
understand.
whole idea is to inform us of what's happening in the Lorain City School community.
Yes.
So that would be data worthy of having because they are part of the Lorain City Schools community. So, but again, it's not just a Lorain City Schools decision. We have other partners. We have to come to agreement in terms of what makes the most sense in terms of gathering this information.
And one of the big things that we want to know is how effective are our mitigation practices. So we know that we need to design our schools so anybody can be contagious and the virus doesn't transmit. And so the testing is so important for us to be able to know, is the virus transmitting in school or not? And if it isn't, we know we're going to have cases, but our environment is designed well to keep people safe. It's okay to keep school open. If we do have cases and we're transmitting in school, our environment's not okay, and we need to make adjustments very quickly, or we need to look at, do we need to, go back to phase 1, for example. But one of the big things connected to that is to be able to test how effective our mitigation strategies are.
Thanks.
Clear. Good. All right. And so again, update in terms of how we're getting better at phase 1, because again, it's not going away. At least that aspect of remote learning will be around for a long, long time, pandemic or not. Transitioning to phase 2 and where we are with the feedback that we received. So I'm going to hand off to Ross and Michael via Zoom.
All right, so we'll walk through just the kind of highlights of the 2 different surveys that we ran for the last couple of weeks. We had the staff survey and then the family surveys. And so we'll just kind of spotlight those. And we sent, before the meeting here this evening, we sent these same results out to everybody in the district. So everybody has access to the same data that the Restart group looked at last Thursday, same data that we're going to take a look at here tonight. So we'll start with the staff survey. On the left side, and that is kind of small on the screen, isn't it? A little bit bigger. So on the left side, you can just see the staff roles and then the number of staff that participated in the survey. We have 892 total staff members. We had 748 members participate. And then you can see each kind of by staff assignment, the numbers of participants. For just graphical purposes, anybody, any staff group that had 10 or more participants was included in the graphing. Anybody that had fewer than 10 was not included in the graphs. And then we also just looked by level. So we can see the number of participants by level. So just a few of the highlights. The way the results are set up, we had classified path to the survey. So classified employees had specific questions for them. Staff that was licensed had specific questions for them. So you can see there's a color-coded legend that goes with the results. And then one of our first questions here was, would you be willing to get a free COVID test? And so we wanted to see just from our staff willingness to participate in COVID testing. And so we can see the results from classified, licensed staff, and then you go back, licensed staff by role, so administrator, counselor, related service provider, teacher, and then by level. And that's the pattern that we that holds up throughout all the results. So the COVID testing, the results were actually great. So we're very excited to see really about 70% of our staff saying either yes or maybe they would be interested. So that's really excellent. We know we need to do a lot of education around what the testing looks like. As Dr. Graham referenced before, it's only going very shallow, about an inch up the nose, not going way back deep like some of the first tests were. Other questions, we asked, would you be willing to participate in virtual wellness sessions? We know, wellness is extremely important this time. We know that our mental health and well-being is every bit as important as our physical health and well-being. So we're looking to see our staff's interest and willingness to consider participating in those sessions. So we've got some results there. We want to make sure that we're checking in, and we want to know if our staff believes their health has been prioritized with their job duties. So those results are there. And then clarity about role. Questions about technology. Do you have what you need and are you comfortable using it? So that's on the classified side. And then over on the licensed side, we had overlap with the testing questions. Those are the same. And then the safety was the same. And then we wanted to know about staff input about how effective our schedules for instruction are. So how are the synchronous days going for you? How are the asynchronous days going for you? And the majority of our staff, across all levels, says the synchronous days are going okay. We have a few staff that disagree and strongly disagree, but the vast majority either agree, strongly agree, or are neutral that the synchronous learning is allowed for the right amount of student contact. On the asynchronous side, not quite as strong. High school is the strongest in how they feel the asynchronous days are going. Our 3-5 and pre-K 2 are the least satisfied with how well asynchronous days is allowing for students to apply or extend learning. And a question about how well we're meeting students' disabilities and English learners' needs. We want to know if our staff has been able to use what they learned in EdCamp so far this year. We're very excited to see that our staff is saying yes, they have been able to apply what they learned in EdCamp so in the summer, which was fantastic. So we'll certainly look to have more EdCamps coming up. We want to know about the collaboration time. Our staff overall feels pretty good about the amount of collaboration time that they have. And that's going to be really important going forward. We know really healthy, strong collaborative structures is one of the most important things we can do. So we're pretty excited to see that our staff feels like the collaboration time right now is about right. We asked questions about the support you're receiving from central office and your building administrator. So those results are here. We want to know how effective the help desk has been to help resolve technology problems. And we want to know about how satisfied you are with communication between families and me as the adult so far. And so for this one, the pre-K 2 is really overall very satisfied. Our high school folks are the least satisfied. So we've got some work to do there. So the other thing, we're not going to go through all of them, but just from a process standpoint, we asked our staff, just how are you doing? And so they told us. And so here are all the comments about how they're doing. We asked specifically about technology, about the schedule specifically, a main question you have right now, and then anything else that staff would like to tell us. And so our restart group met last Thursday. Obviously, some of you are part of that. We went through, we read every single comment. We looked for themes, and then some next steps out of that, we need to get with our principals, and our principals are going to do some analysis. And then we're going to have some work groups from that restart group to take a look at some of the major themes that have emerged that we need to make some adjustments. As Dr. Graham referenced earlier, some things with technology, for example, need adjusted a little bit. Communication at the high school needs adjusted a little bit. We need to take a look at asynchronous days. We're going to need to do some adjusting there. So we've got some areas that are standing out now that we knew all along when we designed this, it is not going to be perfect and that we're going to make some mistakes. And the key is we need to listen so we can find out what is going well and where we do have some areas for improvement. And so we've got, I think, a pretty clear picture from our staff, some of those areas that need for us to keep going, and then also for adjustments that we need to make. Pause there on the staff before we go to the family. Miss anything there?
Nope.
Michael, anything you want to add and contribute to the staff before we go to families?
No,
It's just-
but, well, go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Mike.
No, I think the process that we're working through. So the survey ended Wednesday, and Ross compiled this Wednesday night, and we were meeting with a group Thursday to go through, and we went through a protocol for all this data, the family data, kind of find out what those areas, those opportunities to course correct, where they landed, and now the work is how to make those in a timely manner. Knowing that we're trying to build, our intent was always to build with the most vulnerable in mind, but then to continue to get better. But at the same time, going to what we started this meeting with, highlighting the areas that are going well. So I did want to spotlight the fact that in the breakout group that I facilitated, the fact that a lot of our staff, and we did talk about the continuum of staff's feelings about how they're doing, the group felt a little surprised that more people were feeling better than what had been expected. And it came back to, as we did a mini root cause analysis, is that it thought it was going to go worse than it has started. So there was feelings of anxiety early on, and rightfully so. Some things did not work. But I do think it's important to give credit to our principal leaders, assistant principals, the technology support that people have been given, and just making sure that they have been hugely accessible and flexible with their schedules. And I think that has contributed greatly to people feeling as though this is a lift that we can, in Dr. Graham's word, thrive in, but at the same time be honest. And because people were very honest about when they weren't feeling well and why, and now we can make those adjustments. So I do look forward to getting back with that work group of people and say, okay, well, what does making an adjustment around scheduling look like, so that we can continue to get better in this process, knowing that we are here right now, and while we're planning for phase 2, we have to get good at this phase 1, because there's a lot of practices that we can take away from this that will help us in when we fully return and when we partially return along the way. So.
Ed? All right, so then we also sent surveys to our families. And so the family survey results, there we go. So we, again, ran that over about 2.5 week period. And the total response, we ended up having responses attached to 2,048 of our students. So it's about 34% of our students across the district. So just for comparison's sake, we're at 52% in the summer. So our response rate was down a little bit. And so that's something that, just from an improvement standpoint, we need to do better. And so we've got to take a look and see how we better connect with our families. Because of what our next surveys coming up here very soon is going to be, what learning model do you prefer for your child, remote or kind of a hybrid in person? So we're going to need to make an adjustment there to make sure that we connect with all of our families. Again, same pattern as the staff survey. So we asked our families, would you, and this is for the family member, be willing to get a COVID test? And then would you be willing to have your child tested? And so we're actually very encouraged that over 30% of our families all said yes. And then about 30% of our families said maybe. And we know that we need to do a lot of educating again. And so when we asked this initially, that we were just the very, very beginning stages of figuring out how we could possibly test our families or our students rather and staff. And so we've got a lot of educating to do on the type of testing and the notification, the opt-out, those types of things that we've not communicated to our families yet because we don't have all those details quite worked out yet. We've asked about meals. Meals is an area that we increased the availability to 36 sites. So we just checked to see, are you even aware that we've done that? And so we had about 65, 67% of our folks saying yes, but we've still got some work to do there. And so that showed up very clearly that many of our families, the hours still don't align with their work schedules, and transportation are some barriers to get meals. So we still have some work to do there. We wanted to know again about medical needs and awareness of the health clinic at Washington Elementary. We've had a small percentage of our folks use the health clinic. We also have a number that aren't even aware of it. So we've got some work to do there to communicate the clinic is there. It is at Washington on site in our district. Counseling and mental health, we want to make sure that we're following up with our needs there. In the summer survey, we were around 1 in 5 students, or 1 in 5 students that had a mental health or counseling need that had not been met. So that's cut in half on this survey results. And that's something that Jeff Karuski, his folks, the social workers have been working very hard to reach out to our families. So we're excited to see that percent drop some. We asked specifically again about internet and computer. So we can see the percent of folks that have had either don't have reliable internet or do not have internet yet. And of the respondents, we're about 2.4% of our respondents that don't have internet yet. Have you had problems with your child's computer or iPad? And Dr. Graham talked about this earlier. We know we've got some hiccups there. Elementary and middle school seem to have a larger percentage of problems. High school seems to be going a bit better. But it's something for us to follow up and look into and make sure that, as Dr. Graham said, when the technology is your only connection to school, it's got to work, or there is going to be some frustration there.
And we're finding that a lot of the issues with our younger children and the devices is their inability to use the device. So it's tough to educate a 5 or 6 year old child on how to use an iPad remotely while the child's using the iPad. So some of those things we are finding aren't necessarily issues with the device, it's issues with supporting the device in a way that makes it useful for the child. So again, some of the challenges that we face.
And these will be some items that we'll want to follow up with, to see, because we're going to expect these problems to drop as the year goes on. So this is where we are now. It's a good baseline for us. And then when we survey again, we're going to expect that we will have fewer problems based on our families, our children, our staff being more comfortable with the devices and the environment that they're teaching. We asked about preferred way to communicate the child's teacher. So this varies by level, but Dojo is very popular at elementary. Dojo and phone at middle school, and then by high school, phone and email seem to be the most popular ways. We asked our families how satisfied they are with the schedule for learning so far. And our families as a whole, and in the comments, were pretty supportive of the schedules with the synchronous days and the asynchronous days. We asked about satisfaction with engagement. And then we asked how often to our families would they like to hear from us, for us to check in with them. And at each level, the overwhelming majority of frequency was monthly. So that'll be something for us to talk to. Our families are saying, look, we would like to communicate more. So that's our job then, to meaningfully communicate more back with our families. Just as with the staff, we asked specifically about meals. We know that that's a really important, vital part of one of the services that we deliver. So we asked for any family that has had difficulty with meal pickup. What are those problems? So, and again, transportation and the hours that we offer meals seem to be 2 of the main things that are barriers for us to look into. And then again, we asked our families, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? And so we have lots of comments there. And again, we look through the through all the comments, read through every comment, and we're looking to determine some of the main themes that emerged. And so, we saw some themes around some of our families are just absolutely thrilled with the amount of dedication our teachers are putting in, no doubt about that. Other families have been very clear. Look, this is not going well, and it's hard for me to balance, working my own schedule and then also trying to help my child learn or to get online, or there, it's maybe a couple of too many applications for them need and with my child to be able to juggle. So, we've got some growth there to do as well. So all of this, again, like Michael talked about before, we're going to get back with work groups and to look at some of those real high priority items, because again, none of us have ever opened up a school in the pandemic. And so very well-intended approach. And we have some things that are going very well. And we also have to have adjustments that we need to make. And so those groups need to get back together and we need to take a look and say, all right, where are we? What have we learned so far? What adjustments do we need to make? So we can get better at this, because as Dr. Graham has said repeatedly, it's not going away. And so we need to make sure that we're getting better. And then as Michael said, as we're also looking at phase 2 as well. Things you want to bring in that? Michael, other things you want to add to that?
No, I think you hit it very well. But I'm willing to talk about phase 2 any point that we're ready to transition.
All right, let me just kind of talk about phase 1 here for just 30 seconds or so. And are we there yet? Clearly we're not, but we're making great progress. Yes. Now, again, just for the purposes of context, we started this, we started surveying people in July, started putting things together, and we knew from the feedback we received from our staff, we had a very small percentage of our staff who felt comfortable with any aspect of remote learning. So a vast majority had no clue what we were doing. And here we are 2 months later, and keep in mind, it's a pretty big deal, because we are learning how to provide an education in a way that we've never had to do before. We are not there. And people have stumbled, all of us, we've all made major mistakes. But again, we're focused, we're taking chances, we're leaning on each other, and we're getting better. And the approach and the philosophy that we've had from the beginning and working with our staff is to lead with love and grace. Understanding that people are doing the best they can during really crazy circumstances. And it's not just making sure all these things are working here, but as Ross mentioned, it's also, as the families are struggling with all this, our adults in our buildings are also struggling with COVID at home. I mean, it's not just a work issue. In that same spirit, we have 6,000 students who are also new to this and also new to remote learning, receiving an education in a very different way. And again, our goal and approach, and again, I hope you hear me say this repeatedly, is for our staff to understand what our children are going through, and in turn to lead with love and grace, and understand that right now homes are pretty chaotic, and education, these are extenuating circumstances are across the board in every aspect of what we're doing. And I think that one of the beautiful things about the city of Lorain and the people who live here is our ability to unify and to lean on and take care of one another. So I'm proud to have a front row seat to watching that happen. And again, we will continue to stumble, but we will continue to improve at a higher rate than most, because of the level of care that we have and the compliments I consistently receive on behalf of our staff. Phase 2.
All right, Michael, you want to step through phase 2 and just where we are and where we're going?
Yeah. So obviously we have a phase 2 team that has met. One of the first things that we did is we created some questions. We had a protocol. We knew we learned a lot from our original just planning for school in the month of July and August, before we had made a decision on remote. We had to answer a lot of questions to build a school that students could come and staff could come into. But once we made the decision to go remote, we clearly put all of our focus on that. So what we are doing now in the phase 2 piece here is we're building model schools. So we have some model schools that are being constructed at the elementary level, the middle school level, and of course our high school level. And while we were talking about the elements that would make a school safe, taking in all the mitigation strategies that we've learned, we also developed some questions that a committee of 40 or so people wanted answered. So as we created these questions, we began to think as a group, well, there's already schools that are doing this, and some that are doing this very well, based upon just the conversations that we had as a phase 2 restart group. So we decided to reach out to some districts. So this past week, we met with 3 different districts. This week, we've got 4 more on the docket with a potential 5th, where we have a series of questions around mitigation strategies, around technology usage in a hybrid environment. We also have a series of questions around potential live streaming, what's worked, what have been the challenges, what are you doing just with your hybrid schedule, masking procedures and safety procedures, sanitation procedures, how are you running labs in a hybrid? You name it. I think we've asked a ton of questions. And the great thing about going to visit the schools, whether in person or virtually, is that we've had teachers, operation, all at the table to learn. So we have another restart meeting on phase 2 restart meeting on Thursday, where we can share what we've learned this week, and then begin the hard work of building our instructional models, looking at our design models. And there's a group of principals that are meeting at a school tomorrow to kind of just talk through what has already been built, so that we can get questions, highlights. But it's been a really informative process, and our goal is to be able to take all this information and supply it to our community. This is where we are, and whenever that time is to move forward with phase 2, this is what it looks like. This is what the educational experiences will be like. Make a choice. Where do you feel comfortable right now? We know that some families are going to still want to be in the remote piece, when we need to be able to staff that. And all these questions that are coming up, we're seeking to get answers so everyone can feel knowledgeable in where we are. So that's what's been going on the last, what is this now, week and a half since our last time together. And we're going to continue to bring that information together. We're looking to have some model schools finished this week. Be able to begin to then create a way, whether it's through video, having people come in to see these schools, and from a safety standpoint of what they look like and how we built them. And then we'll continue to add pieces. So that's phase 2 in a nutshell. Ross, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think too, just to emphasize maybe that we do expect by the end of the week to have our model schools done, and that to have our folks in some capacity, either video or in person in small groups next week, to be able to see and to vet what our model schools look like, and then also to match that against what we've learned, as Michael said, the 7 other districts that we've either already talked to or will talk to here in the next couple of days. So we can kind of combine the best of what we've learned into our own environments.
And I think it's safe to share too that even the districts that are back face-to-face are having struggles, whether it's through remote. So we've also been able to share some of the things that we've learned through our remote experiences. So there's a true networking that we have that we're hoping to keep going throughout this COVID experience and just into when normalcy resumes. So I want to preface things to say, returning face-to-face does not solve everything. We know that there's a great deal of importance around that. But as we've said in phase 1, safety of staff, safety of students drives everything that we're doing relative to our decision making. And we've asked those questions around safety measures. And what we've learned is there are a great deal of students that that chose a model that are compliant in that. But we're also learning that casual spaces are an area of concern. So casual spaces such as cafeteria, and we're learning the different approaches that people have taken. Casual spaces such as drop off and dismissal, and how they're trying to mitigate risk there. So it really has been a learning piece to see those that have taken, based upon their community responses, leaps into that. But at the same time, being able to learn, well, this worked, this didn't work. Some districts have told us point blank, don't do this because it didn't work for us. So it's just good information to be able to bring back to a committee so we can make informed decisions along the way.
As I mentioned, excuse me, we have a meeting on Thursday, and I expect to have a lot of these questions answered then or after the meeting. And as we always have, we'll share the information as soon as we can. But in my mind anyway, I have it compartmentalized two different ways. You know, what they were talking about is, what does it look like? What are all the ways, all the things we have to put in place to make sure we're keeping people as safe as we can? So there's the, what does it look like piece? And then once we understand what it needs to look like, how long does it take us to put that plan together? I don't think it takes long. The other thing, the other compartment in my mind is, okay, first of all, it's what does it look like? And then when's the right time to do it? So again, we're blessed to have partnerships with Dave Koval and our health department, who's been outstanding, with Mercy Health, and again, with a local university with medical expertise, research expertise that can help us with all these different pieces and answer those questions. So again, we will know more later in the week, and we will share it once we know it. Anything else? No good? All right.
I have a couple questions. Do we, and I don't remember exactly what it was, as far as the survey, which was fantastic, what was the percentage represented of our students?
34%.
34? And have we been able, I know we talked about this, are we coming up with any real strategic ways in which we might be able to engage that other percentage of folks? I mean, it's, we traditionally have some issues with that. And so are there any thoughts around exactly some strategies that we might be able to implement too?
Well, our families have been, I think, pretty clear with us now in a couple different surveys and how they like to be reached out. And so what we learned in the summer is that many of our families prefer phone calls. And then our elementary folks just this time told us they really like Class Dojo. And so we did with this one a lot more online is what we were looking to, and our results weren't as good. And so that's something that we learned. And so for our next one, we need to pick up the phone and personally contact our families more, because they told us that's what they prefer. We need to use Dojo a bit more because our families told us that's what they prefer. And we're probably going to need to go door to door as well, because we especially for this next one, we need to know all of our students. And first of all, are they safe? Are they well? Do they need anything? And then we also need to know, what's your intention based on our return to school for choice? So is your intention to stay remote? Is your intention to come in person? We certainly hope that they would prefer to choose in person, but we know that remote is probably the best option for some of our families. So we're going to need to know that for all of our students, not just a sample for the next one.
Well, I imagine that's going to be really critical in trying to determine our staffing
Vital
needs and utilization of buildings and space.
Yep.
So I guess what we're saying is, if we would encourage our families, when someone tries to communicate with you, please respond back. I don't know how we can figure out how many teachers in this area we need or anything else without that feedback from those folks.
Without a lot of feedback, we're going to guess wrong in some areas, and we will adjust. So again, we'll do the best we can with the information we have. But to Ross's point, that during the second survey, we knew that our families preferred phone calls and to be reached out to in that way. But it was also at the very beginning of all the training that went into the remote learning piece. And our staff was, understandably so, incredibly fatigued. So to ask our staff to, on top of that, do this, we experimented and it didn't go well. So now we know better on how to proceed, but we also are in a different place in terms of implementing remote learning. And we also know that we have, and I mentioned this at the last couple board meetings, again, and just praising our staff, no one, especially in our support staff, are doing anything close to what their job description spells out. So we are repurposing and reassigning because we don't want to lose good people. We don't want to, eliminate positions and hire somewhere else to get. So we're trying to make sure we're training everybody to meet the needs of our kids in a way that's in line with their skill sets. So we do have access to going out and doing home visits and making more phone calls and doing things in a more purposeful way because we've had an opportunity to restructure something. So again, we're in a different place now than we were during the second survey.
Do we know when the third survey is going out so that those, like we can say it's going out in 2 weeks, so they can be ready to set that time aside? Because it really worries me that we went down 18% when it's getting more critical that we have more data and we're getting less data. So like how accurate are the surveys if they're going down when we need more data coming in? So like if they know that survey's coming out in 2 weeks, they can set that time aside for the employees that they're going to have make the calls, go out, whatnot. If we have a time for them, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and so that'll be something that we talk about on Thursday with the group. You know, when we piece that together, when does it make the most sense for us to do that? So I can't answer that now, but.
No, I'm just saying, when we
Yeah.
do have that, get that out and say, you know, the survey's coming out in 2 weeks, so you're gonna need to have,
Right.
you know, your employees ready, or the ones that we're setting aside to do that,
Mhm.
so that they are ready.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I'd like the board to consider for discussion and approval, items 3.01 to 3.03, personnel matters.
So,
Second?
roll call?
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Ms. Nazario,
Yes.
Mr. Ballard,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes.
I'd like the board to consider for discussion and approval, items 4.01 to 4.19, operation matters.
Any motion?
So
Motion.
moved.
Motion by Tim, seconded by Bill. Roll call?
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Ballard,
Yes.
and Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
And Mr. President, that is all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Is there anything in new business, guys? No one has anything? All right, there's no committee reports. Let me see, our next meeting is scheduled for. Let me get my cheat sheet up.
October 26th.
Thank you so much. October 26th, 5 o'clock, same location, correct?
Correct.
You guys have nothing further. I do have one item that I need to cover in executive session. It'll be under A7 compensation.
Motion to go into executive session for item A7.
Support. Roll call?
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Ballard,
Yes.
and Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
All right, we will not be taking any action coming out, so we will see you guys at our next meeting. Thank you.
Who do you want in there? Who do you?
I just need you. Okay. It won't be 10 minutes.
No, whatever you need.
Yeah, it won't be 10 minutes.